Last but not least for our speakers this morning, and we're doing very, very good with time. They have of course, they have real estate in their portfolio, but now we go back to a conglomerate of companies, ladies and gentlemen, here to present their consistent efforts and accomplishments towards the net zero goal by 2050. We have the Chief Sustainability and Risk Officer of Ayala Corporation. A round of applause for Mr. Jaime Z. Urquijo. Hi, Jaime.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. You don't want to walk around? No, I'll stay at the podium.
Yeah, most of the men were walking around, so.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Let me just get this sort of sorted. Really, really fantastic to be here, so thank you so much for the opportunity. Truly humbled to be in such a fantastic and sort of prestigious university, and so thank you for the opportunity today. My name is Jaime Urquijo. I'm the Chief Sustainability and Risk Officer. Thank you so much. Of Ayala Corporation. And I've been with the group for just over 10 years now, so joined in 2013. My background is mainly in infrastructure and energy investing, but about 4 months ago I took this new role as the Chief Sustainability and Risk Officer, so relatively new to the role. And so what I thought would be interesting today was to provide a little bit of an insight as to how Ayala Corp at the conglomerate level really thinks about sustainability and how we implement that into our investment strategy and business model going forward. And so as I am relatively new to the role, I thought it might be interesting to start actually with a little bit of a history as to where this sustainability term came from. We've heard from some really, really fantastic speakers today about all the incredible initiatives that different private institutions, of course, we started with how the government is also helping, but how a lot of private institutions are taking sustainability very, very seriously. And so I thought it'd be interesting to plot out where this really sort of came from and sort of what that movement is. So if we could possibly go to the next slide. Fortunately, a lot of the slides will have a lot of text, but bear with me as I kind of walk you through them. So this is a little bit of a timeline as to where this term for corporate sustainability really came from. And in my view, it really comes all the way back to 1953, where a gentleman called Howard Bowen wrote a book called Social Responsibilities of the Businessman. And in that book, he really starts to make a little bit of a case that companies don't only have a responsibility to the shareholders of that company, but actually there are other stakeholders around the company that the business should start taking into consideration and taking into account. And that's really where the term corporate social responsibility was first coined, or CSR. And at that point, most of the responsibility of companies was really one way, one direction. A company makes money, and then with some of those profits, it then starts to fund certain CSR initiatives. It was mainly philanthropic. There is still a lot of room for philanthropic activities and projects, but this is really mainly one way. A company should have a responsibility to fund projects outside. And that concept actually took on and started to sort of gain a lot of momentum until a very, very famous economist called Milton Friedman sees a lot of this happening in the world and decides to submit an op-ed piece to the New York Times in 1970 where he really coins his doctrine. And very, very, very famously, his doctrine really clarifies that in his view, actually the corporate responsibility of a business is not to stakeholders outside of the business, but is only to shareholders. Now, to be clear, he doesn't say that social and environmental issues are not important. He just thinks that a company shouldn't be the one truly addressing those. He thinks that a company's responsibility is really to generate profits, and then those profits should be given back to the shareholders, and then the shareholders can do with those profits what they want. And this created a pretty massive debate. You, of course, have in the 50s this concept of the CSR, where companies really need to start looking at some of the stakeholders outside. Friedman comes out in the 70s with this op-ed piece and sort of slaps that sort of right in the face. And this debate rages on over the next sort of few decades, but thankfully to a lot of people in sort of our profession, the stakeholder view starts to gain more traction. That companies really do have a responsibility outside from just purely generating profits for shareholders to some of the stakeholders outside. And so if we map that along, the term sustainable development, so as I starts out with sort of CSR, the term sustainable development really starts to pop up in the 80s. And the concept there, World Commission generates this report where it describes that sustainable development is defined as the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That starts to sort of gain some traction. The triple bottom line concept, again, building on Bowen's original piece in the 50s, now maybe applying a different framework for companies that maybe in addition to economic, actually social and environmental frameworks should also be used when looking at investments. Finally, the term ESG that we're all so familiar with finally makes its appearance in the early 2000s. And then shared value creation, something that's very close to a lot of our hearts at Ayala Corp, where we're really now building on this, and instead of just looking at these as individual pieces, actually, could we be addressing social and environmental concerns through the actual business dealings of a company? And I'll expand a little bit on that as I progress. And as we see, the bottom right corner is actually the amount of chief sustainability officers that have been hired in top US companies over the last decade. And as we've seen, that amount has really skyrocketed because companies are taking this seriously and they want to figure out how to best address this. Okay, next slide. And so for me, the watershed moment, a lot of debate that's been happening on this as we've seen over the decades, but for me, the watershed moment happens in 2019, where the Business Roundtable, the group of very, 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 very large companies, mainly based in the US, finally comes and signs an agreement stating in black and white that actually their responsibility is not only to shareholders, but actually to stakeholders outside of those shareholders. And they sign that in black and white and sort of make that public. We actually have our own version of that in the Philippines with a Covenant for Shared Prosperity, very, very similar, again, outlining the responsibilities of privately held companies, not just to serve the interests of shareholders, but actually to serve other stakeholders as well. And so as we bring this all together, and this is why I think actually the sustainability movement, especially in private companies, is so exciting. I think in the past, the way that this has been seen is really looking at individual social projects, individual environmental projects that companies could potentially fund and maybe invest in, usually in a philanthropic way. But where I think sustainability is moving is actually combining these two very, very important initiatives, but really thinking about an economic pillar to that as well, to actually, no pun intended, make it sustainable and financially sustainable. So how can we bring all of those two things together and ensure that there is economic sustainability in that? And that's the case that I'll make as to how ultimately Ayala Corp invests and does business. So these are, sustainability in sort of a nutshell. Why is that important to the Philippine context? And if we could just go to the next slide. So amazingly, and I'm sure all of you are well aware of this country holds tremendous potential. So PwC in 2016 mapped out who the largest economies in the world were and tried to plot out what that would look like by the year 2050. And in that year, 2016, the Philippines was ranked as the 27th largest economy. And by their estimates, if everything goes to plan, by the year 2050, we'd be ranked as the 19th largest economy in the world. So that's part of the G20. So tremendous amount of growth that is expected in the Philippines over the next 26 years. So fantastic case. Now, however, there are, of course, a lot of challenges to that. And so if we go through some of those challenges on the environmental side, World Bank called out very clearly the potential damage to GDP that is there from climate change impacts. And then on the social front, especially in the Philippines, 1 in 4 children. So one of the big reasons why there is so much incredible opportunity in the Philippines is because of the youth and our incredibly young population, which is really there to sort of at some point drive the economy forward. But 1 in 4 children at the moment in the Philippines are considered stunted or shorter for their age because of malnutrition. And then we have one of the largest income inequality problems actually in ASEAN, in the Philippines. So incredible potential, but some huge challenges which are facing the country. And it's our belief that actually the corporate space has a big role to play in addressing some of these challenges to enable this fantastic opportunity and fantastic growth that is facing the Philippines. So if we go to the next slide, a lot of fantastic work has happened. We've seen today a lot of the fantastic initiatives that are happening with different sort of groups, and as I mentioned, on the governmental side as well. And so we've actually made, as a country, commitments to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by about 75% by 2030. I think you guys heard from some of the renewable energy developers yesterday, and just the incredible ecosystem that has been built in the Philippines, and full credit to the government for really establishing the context for that. to really develop our renewable energy assets in the country. And then, of course, the Extended Producers Responsibility Act, which just came in place. So a lot of opportunity and a lot of good work that is already happening, but the gap is still absolutely massive. That chart on the bottom right of the screen shows actually how much is invested in individuals at a government level. And if we compare to the US, this is per capita. It's about $30,000 that the government spends on each individual, and in the Philippines, that number is 938. Now, of course, we are a developing country, and there are a lot of gaps. But that gap is really where we feel that the private sector has a big role to play in helping to hopefully bridge that and really invest in services and ultimately the individuals in the Philippines. And so if I can pop on to the next slide. Again, a busy one, but bear with me on this. This is ultimately how we look at sustainability in Ayala Corp. And when taking on this role, one of the clear sort of challenges that I was given was so Ayala Corporation has a 190-year history, and I think the sustainability team's mandate or sort of view is how to ensure that this company could actually remain in place for another 190 years and ensure that it keeps doing some of the work that it is doing. And so that starts actually with a good foundation of compliance. Actually, little known fact, all publicly listed companies in this country, due to the sort of SEC mandate, are actually mandated to publish all of their sustainability work that they do every year in a sustainability report. A lot of companies then integrate that into an annual report. That's publicly available, and so anyone can really read. Thank you so much. Anyone could really read about any publicly listed company's responsibilities and environmental and sustainable initiatives. The next part, which was mentioned today, and my title is Sustainability and Risk, a huge piece of that is very good risk management. There are a lot of risks that face a lot of the companies, especially in this part of the world, and so really ensuring that we are aware of them, measuring them, and then ultimately putting a plan in place to deal with them. Climate change, a lot of the issues that we've discussed on the social front, all of those are risks to companies that need to be addressed and tackled head on. But then finally, and as we come to sort of really the heart of Ayala Corp, it's really thinking about long-term value creation and building truly sustainable and inclusive businesses. And so, I'll go through a few of the examples, but our purpose statement very clearly is to build businesses that enable people to thrive. And if I could sort of walk through a couple of the examples of how we've done that onto the next slide. We've heard from two fantastic players in the real estate business today. The Ayala Group also participates in the real estate sector. Sorry, we can pop up to the next slide. So urban development, a big push for us through the Ayala Group. We have just an incredible footprint across 50 estates in the country, and we take that as a huge responsibility to keep building sustainable and good places to live and work, because that is something that is vital as we really invest in people's ability to thrive in this country. Financial inclusion, a very big theme for us across the group. So our investments through BPI and Globe, that has GCash, really has been a fantastic instigator of financial inclusion across the country, and they continue to push that extremely aggressively by offering new products. GCash has started to move into lending and insurance products and even investment products to really try to democratize financial inclusion so that everyone in the country has the ability to participate in the financial sector. And then basic services, which I'll spend the last bit of the chat on. Manila Water, for us, a fantastic example. In the mid-90s, the government opened sort of came to the private sector looking for a partnership to invest with the government into the water utility system of Manila Water. They decided to basically split Manila into two areas, the east and west zone, and we eventually bid on the east zone of Metro Manila. And at that time, the two sort of facts that I think are always worth calling out is 24/7 water availability in the east zone of Metro Manila was just over 25%. So only about a quarter of the people in the east zone of Metro Manila had 24/7 water, and the water losses were at about 63%. So of the water that starts at the source that ultimately makes it through to your house, 63% of that was being lost along the way, leaky pipes and sort of faulty connections. And in 2022, that number of 24/7 water availability was 99%, and the water losses were at about 13%, which is better than actually a lot of European cities. And so the key for us here is how can we invest in businesses that ultimately enable people to thrive? I think we can all agree that access to water 24/7 is a building block to allow people to really, really thrive. And how can we do that ultimately in a profitable way that also sustains the growth of the company? And then the final slide, just a few of the other basic services. And I think, next slide, please. I think Eric, who's the CEO of ASEN, was here chatting to the group yesterday about the phenomenal work that they've been doing in the renewable energy space. Really, really fantastic work. And I believe he described the beginnings of ASEN really at a time where there was not a lot of clarity as to how the renewables, specifically wind and solar spaces, were really going to develop in the country, but really taking a bet that sector was going to grow, and just the incredible success that they've had now delivering pure renewable energy to our different clients in the Philippines and actually abroad. Globe connectivity, very, very important building block to allow people to thrive. We saw that, of course, during the pandemic when everyone was stuck at home, but still the economy needed to sort of continue growing, and connectivity is a huge, huge, huge part of that. And then, our more recent investments in the health and education space, huge building blocks that are needed for the country to continue to grow. And so we're very, very excited about these newer businesses that we've started to invest in. So that's really me. If I could just sort of wrap up with the final slide. I hope that provided a little bit of an overview as to how we look at sustainability in the group, and a little bit of a history of how the sustainability movement has really grown. How important it is now for companies to be taking this very, very, very seriously. And I hope ultimately, and if we could just, next slide, please. I think the bottom line is really the one that I wanted to sort of leave you with, that the best examples of sustainability for us in enterprises are those that can provide financially viable, relevant, and meaningful solutions to serve the underserved. Ultimately, the underserved here being individuals that are not currently being served by the private sector, and maybe there is a business opportunity to truly sort of serve some of their needs. That's ultimately the thesis of how we invest at Ayala Corp. But again, thank you so much for the invite today. Truly, truly humbled and honored to be here, and looking forward to questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Jaime, please stay on stage. All right. We will be having the panel discussion after Jaime over here. Wow. Thank you. That was record time, by the way. Good. Record time. And I like how you were not responding too much to pressure with that little signboard going 3 minutes, 2 minutes.
Happy to help.
Okay. Here's the thing. With that eye on so many companies, we got bank, health, real estate, malls, power, water, vehicles. That eye on so many. Yeah. And obviously, each company has its own demand.
Right.
And you do want to make sure, you are pushing sustainability efforts. Yes, right. We see all that. How do you get to decide what gets what? Who gets, we're already here. This one, not so much. Yeah. But hey, we demand. What about you increase this one?
Yeah, great
Who
question.
gets the priority?
Great question. I mean, we're very, very thankful that the businesses that I called out are also are decently well developed at this point, actually have their own sustainability teams as well. And so they generate their own initiatives and sort of own needs. We really, at the group level, focus on new potential businesses that we can sort of focus on. Okay. And so there's a lot of collaboration, a big sort of value of having all of these groups. There's a lot of synergies that could be unlocked by just having these discussions. Maybe if one of the group companies is pushing an initiative that they find very, very important, maybe there are some of the other business groups that could benefit from that or benefit from some of the investment. So that's really our role, to try to unlock some of that and some of those synergies.
Okay, I'm going to put you in the hot seat.
Sure.
Final question.
Sure.
When do you say no?
Yeah,
everyone can say, hey, it's a sustainability effort.
Yeah.
They're doing this there. They're doing that there. When do you say no?
Yeah, and I think, honestly, for the sustainability movement, I think this is a very important one. And I come back to financial viability, actually. Okay. So trying to make an investment case for this. Looking at sustainable initiatives, these things don't need to generate necessarily a return in 1 year, 2 years. Or even protect your return if we're looking at it from a risk standpoint. But eventually, this needs to come back.
It's always the long-term goal.
And I think that practice and developing that muscle for sustainability initiatives is very important if we want to keep pushing the sustainability movement forward, especially in a corporate space.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for answering my question.
So much.
I'm going to ask you to stay here because we're going to put some seats.